Outside of the teenage years, the most distressing time for most parents, especially new ones, are what we affectionately call the terrible twos and traumatic threes. What if it didn't have to be this way? What if you could create peace and harmony through what is otherwise considered a stressful time? Often, it boils down to being an adult and doing something that's much frowned upon these days, and that's disciplining your children. Let's discuss.
Hey there, family. Thanks for joining us once again here at Family on Trial. We are back for another episode, and this one's going to be about our early childhood discipline. And I know, discipline is a dirty word in today's family setting. We do not necessarily believe in it, and if you do, you're harsh, you're wrong. But I'm going to share some insights today of why it's important to discipline early and often in order to set our children up later in life in a way that's going to help them succeed and be whole, both emotionally, mentally, and physically. I'm joined in the studio today by my good friend Dennis McGrogan. I'm so happy to have him riding alongside this evening here in the studio as we get into this topic, because there's the good, the bad, the ugly, and then there's everything in between. And if we are not aware, how can you fix it? If it needs to be fixed, and how can you maintain the proper course if you don't know you're on it? So with that, we'll get into it. And again, this is going to be about early childhood discipline. And originally, titled this particular segment The Crying Chair, and we'll get into why I named it The Crying Chair here in a little bit, because we're going to go into some actual things that can be done, some practical things, and because I know there's a lot of folks who are not believers in corporal punishment, and that's fine. You don't have to apply corporal punishment, but personally, I'm not against it. But if that's not your thing, there are other techniques that can be applied. But we definitely are living in a society today, in a culture today that requires discipline, because we are losing our children. We're losing our children to a lot of different things, whether it be drugs, alcohol, Disney.
Yes.
You know, I'm being a little tongue in cheek, but actually, you see it. You turn the television on these days, and you should understand what I'm saying. We're losing our children to more than the usual suspects. It's music, it's television, it's other adults. So, as we get into this, Dennis, how are you doing today, sir? You doing okay?
Fine, thank you. Thanks for having me here.
All right, well, I'm thank you for being here, and I really appreciate you stepping in. And I was looking for someone to have this conversation with, and you came to mind. In fact, I approached you. It's been weeks, maybe months, at this point that I approached, and I could not think of a better person to have this conversation with because of the insights you've shared with me over these past year or so since meeting you, and I really appreciate your experience and your, not only that, but your willingness to share, and I really appreciate that so much.
You're welcome.
Discipline in early childhood, and as this came to mind for me because I'm out and about often, and I see and also hear conversations and situations involving teenagers and their parents. And it dawned on me that we kind of take it at face value that teenagers are going to just be horrible, and girls are going to be mean, and boys are going to be aloof and or violent. And it's just that tendency for teenagers to do that and be that. But then I look at things like what happens when they're 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old, and the lack of discipline at that stage leads to an inability to discipline in the teen years. And that really comes back not only to haunt the parents, but it haunts the children.
Yeah, it does.
Because they end up becoming adults who are undisciplined and do not have the tools to cope with life's ills, and because life is up and down, and it's not going to always be sunshine and gumdrops.
No.
And without discipline, there's no way to get through what we would consider a perilous time, where when the storm clouds are rolling in and it's raining and windy and you can't see your way. How do you deal with that without a lack of discipline, except other than go down in flames, which is unfortunately happening to more and more kids today. So in your experience, Dennis, you've had, how many children do you have?
I have 4.
4, okay.
10 grandchildren.
Oh, my goodness. What a large blessing.
Yes, I didn't know it was going to happen. I don't think they knew it was going to happen. You just walk it out,
Mm-hmm.
When I grew up as a kid on Long Island, back in the 50s and 60s. It was my sister and I. My parents are from Ireland, from Europe, and kind of old-fashioned. My dad was 45 years older than me, and he was really set in his ways, and he was like a grandfather to me, and he was just angry all the time. He just couldn't understand the American way, and especially when I started getting into the 60s and being a teenager, that really, I think, disturbed him, and I think it magnified his drinking problem, which went from a problem to total addiction and alcoholism that he got so much worse. They kept this in line. I mean, I think he'd get angry at me for being a boy. I think my wife of today, I remember when our children I came home from work one day from working in the prison, and you know what your 2 boys did today? I said, what, honey? I just had a long day, and she explained to me what happened. And I said, okay, I'm going to take care of it. And she says, now, let me tell you something. She says, you have to look at it 2 ways. Did they do a demonic thing, or did they just do a boy thing? And I looked at it, and I really thought for a second, and all they did were being boys. They were just acting boys. And so I remember walking in the room, and the 2 of them were looking at me going, oh, what's going to happen now? And I looked at them, I said, go to your room. Just get out of here. Don't do that again, Where my dad would just, he'd hit me with the belt, on the buttocks. I mean, he hit me on the behind, and he didn't beat me per se. He was never there though, because of the drinking, and my mom never stood behind him or behind me or my sister. So we kind of struggled as we went along. I remember coming home, and she told me I did something. When he told my dad I did something, she's getting in the bathroom. So I went in the bathroom and put me over his knee and closed the door. And he had this razor strap. He used to with a straight razor and a big strap, and I remember him snapping it. I'm going, oh my God, this is not going to be good, So he put me over his knee and proceeded to have at it, And right in the middle of it, I hear my mom outside the door. She says, Dave, hit him but don't hurt him. Hit him but don't hurt him. And I said, Mom, he's on a roll. I said, you're not going to stop him now. I said, it's too late, So that was the kind of discipline I got, and it kept me in check. I think long enough till I became old enough to 13, 14, hitting high school, and noticing that there's another world out there. In the early 60s, things were changing, and I kind of changed with it, unfortunately in the wrong way. And I know, being raised in a Catholic church, and the do's and the don'ts, I just felt when I come out of confession and confessed all my sins, that if I seen a pretty girl and I had an impure thought, I was going right to hell. So I go back and confess it, and I walk out again and said, gee, if I see another pretty girl and a truck hits me before I can go back and confess my sins, I'm going to hell, so I can't be good enough. I just realized at a young age I could never be good enough, but I took the extreme and said, well, maybe I can be bad enough. I think a lot of it, as I looked, was for attention. I just looked for attention from my dad for anything. I wanted especially my dad. My mom, she loved us the best she could. She'd make birthdays happen and Christmas, and he was just drunk most of the time. But I wanted his approval, and I never could get it. I remember my mom said one time, your dad loves you. And I said, he's never told me that. I said, how do I know that? and it was a struggle. And then hitting high school, my sister and I went to high school, public high school, from Catholic school. If anybody knows the transition, it's quite different. And I was 2 years older than everybody else because Catholic school, they liked me so much they kept me back a couple of years. The nuns were pretty tough. If you failed one subject, you failed them all, which till this day I didn't think was fair. But I think in the long run it really helped me because physically I was a little bigger. So when I went into public school, I ran into some problems, the Catholic kid, and I learned pretty quick how to handle myself. I knew a fellow that was older and he taught me how to protect myself. And I hung out with, I played ball. I was not a bad ball player, basketball, a little football, but I just hung out in the street corner more than I just liked that more than, teachers used to say, if you wouldn't hang out on the street corner, you could make you could be somebody. I could have went to a small college playing basketball, but I just had that, I think my parents I gave up on them, they gave up on me, I don't know. If they're not giving love, my dad was not giving love. In Ireland, he was taken off the farm and had to work on his uncle's farm, and he never went back home. And he stowed away on a boat and came to America when he was 16. So that's the way he started. Not much love there, so how is he going to show me any love?
Right.
So it was really difficult.
Yeah, and you're actually hitting on something that I think is very, very important. Is if you have to be present for your children, and two, part of parenting that I think very few parents take into consideration is teaching your children how to raise children. Because one day they will be the parent, and the only example they can really go by is the example you set.
You're exactly right, Daryl. I had no example to look at. I had no role models. I really didn't. And when you don't have that, you're 200% correct. If you haven't got that, I have nothing to go by. I would listen to the teachers, some of the teachers in school that disciplined me, and they say, we're doing this for this, this, and this. They at least explained to me when I did something wrong, we're disciplining you because of this. I had a direction and a purpose in your life. We talk about, you and I talk about that. And a lot of kids today have not got that. They haven't got a direction and a purpose. They don't know where they're coming from. It's confusing, and they see the future. But if they would learn in the now what they need to know, and there's ways of knowing that, from better parents. But I think God would put someone in your life that would help you and walk you through certain things.
I think that's where a lot of parents get hung up today, because they see all forms of discipline as abuse, and which, if you want to boggle the mind a bit, in my estimation, zero discipline is abusive as well.
Exactly.
So too much is too much, and not enough is you're going to end up with the same results.
You're exactly right, and I think with a good wife, for a man, I'm just speaking now, for a good wife that I ended up with, a good wife, she helped me raise the children. I always thought she raised me and the 4 kids very well. She did a good job, and I think she did. And she would show me and explain to me sometimes what they did and how to go about it. And I struggled with it, but I tried to do the best I can. What you don't want to do with a child is break their spirit.
Absolutely.
You can discipline them to a place where you and your wife think you're doing a good job, a good godly wife like mine. I'm just picking mine out. She knows, I think, how far to go with that, and she really helped me with it on the balance. And I think the balance on discipline is the same as church or work or anything else.
Oh yeah.
We're still always looking for that balance, but to overdo it is not good. And like you were saying earlier, to not do anything at all is a sin.
Yeah.
You said it really right.
Yeah.
Right. I like that. It's a sin too.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You end up with similar issues. Doing too much and doing too little. And that's the perfect word is balance. I'm a firm believer in disciplining children, or having disciplined children. I'm not a firm believer in disciplining them. I prefer not to have to.
Right, exactly.
That is my natural preference. I don't want to have to admonish and correct. But you're presented with situations where you ought to, or it's going to be detrimental to the child in the long run. I remember when my daughter, she's 18 now, but when she was 5 in kindergarten, we get these reports. I got a report from a teacher, and it's something you alluded to earlier about your boy did boy things. And it was my 5-year-old being a 5-year-old, and they were recommending all these crazy things. They wanted her to go on this ADHD, drugs, and basically I told her in a nutshell. And I had a conversation with my daughter, and I told the teacher, I said, look, I'm her dad, and I love her. I'm not here to break her spirit. I want her personality is her personality. Now, if you don't have the necessary tools in your toolbox to redirect her and get her to do the things that she needs to do, then perhaps you shouldn't be in the classroom any longer. I said, now I'll have a conversation with her, and she's going to understand that if you have any more issues with her, there's going to be things she's going to have to do at home in order to until she turns her behavior around. But I'm not medicating her, and I'm not taking a lazy way out, and I'm not breaking her spirit.
Yeah.
It's just she's 5. She's going to do what 5-year-olds do. I mean, anymore now, how do you expect 5-year-olds to sit in the same seat for 3 and 4 hours straight? I don't even know how that works. It didn't really work for me, and trust me, I was far from being rude and disrespectful to teachers, because you didn't bring that home. You didn't bring that report home to my house. So yeah, while there's a necessity for discipline, but see, Dennis, this is where it gets complicated for a lot of folks, especially folks who have no example to go by. You don't know what balance looks like, and so you end up with extremes. And that's what we have now in our culture, in our communities. We just have extremes. We have people who go way too far, and then we have folks who don't even try. They just see everything as if I say anything to my child to correct their behavior, or there's no such thing as my child having negative behavior. There's no such thing. You have those folks as well. I'm going, we shouldn't be on a pendulum. We shouldn't be left or right. We should be in the center, and that's not a pendulum. That's a road. It should be walking straight down the center of the road, and so we, that's what we're left with. And we live now in a time where mental health issues are a huge part of daily conversations, and I don't take away anything from that, because we live in a time where folks struggle with many things. I'm of the opinion that some of those things can be mitigated with a mother in the home, with a father in the home, and with balanced, consistent child rearing.
Yeah.
And you mentioned being in the prison system. You're corrections officer there for many years. There any observations that you can estimate was with the inmates that where you could see, well, perhaps a more balanced home life or a more disciplined home life might have been? Any conversations in that direction ever, or?
So many things. I remember Mrs. Rodriguez. She used to come and visit her twin sons. She'd come up on Saturday all day and visit one, come back, go all the way down to New York City, come back upstate Sunday and visit the other one. They held up a bank, they were high on drugs, and killed 5 people. So one day I just, jeez. And, hey Dennis, how you doing? I mean, look, she see me all the time. I says, can I ask you a question? Mrs. Rodriguez? Yeah, Dennis, what is it? You know that, with your boys, and you come up here and visit them every weekend. And you take time, you work all week, and you send them some money if you can, and you're a single mom. And she said, oh, Dennis, she says, but I love them. They're my sons. I know what they did is wrong, and they need to pay for it. But I'm never going to stop loving them. And it just, a lot of the guys in prison never I shared this one time. I was just starting to do the Bible study, and I just got in this role, and I didn't think I rolled the wrong way, but you know, and I said, I said, if you guys would have stayed with your wife, your first love, and not hooked up with these other, you could talk different in a Bible study in prison than you do in a Bible study in church. You explain things better.
Right.
And I said, and you got all these women and, this, that, and everything like that. If you stick with that, if you stick with your first wife, you'd have been the man that God called you to be instead of just doing what you want. And I put a little more stuff on it, a little spin on it. Well, that did not, but it didn't drop like that. It really hit them, Some of them got up and left and called me a few names and stuff like that. Up till a year later, within that year later, the guys that left and all the guys in the group said, thank you. Thank you. Understood. And almost every guy, their father was a drug dealer, the worst, fooling around their mothers all the time, the worst guy in the world, just killing. They always looking for the dad's attention, for a man's attention to give them direction in their lives, and they never got it. And it's, I remember the head Muslim in the prison came to make fun of we were doing a retreat. A bunch of guys from the church. We came in and brought a guy and doing a men's retreat, and he was there, and he was standing there, and my assistant pastor walked up to him, big guy too, Dave, laid hands on this Muslim inmate, the head imam. Power of God hit him and went down. Dave went over, led him to Jesus. He's crying and snotting on the floor, whole life being. End up, the Muslims in the street heard about it. He had nothing to do with Muslim anymore. They took his wife, kidnapped his wife, and all this stuff like that. I met this inmate. He went back to his regular name. Years later, in Greenhaven prison, I was bringing inmates through in a van and everything like that. We had to stop at the gate, and a work crew was going by, and the head, I forgot his name, but the head guy stood up on the thing. Yo, Mr. D, I'm still serving Jesus. Thank you. We love you.
Nice.
And I went, making a difference.
Yeah.
Now he's, I don't think he's ever going to go home. But he's got Jesus. And I ran into the pastor that came in to be the pastor of my prison. He came from Sullivan County, anyway, another prison upstate. And I said, who was your pastor, your inmate pastor inside your prison? I heard a story. He says, yeah, it was the son of Sam. I says, he was your inside pastor? I said, you kidding me? He says, nope. He was my pastor. So it's just, I says, what about him? He says, oh, he knows Jesus really well. Born again, spirit filled. He writes children's books now. He tells everybody, if I ever committed this crime in any other state, like especially Texas, I wouldn't be having this conversation. But I'm here to help the young and the old to find Jesus, to get out, and if they don't get out, serve them the rest of their days. And I had kind of judged certain categories of people, not just inmates, on their sins or their crimes. And after that, I stopped judging them. God looks at everybody the same, and He'll forgive and forget as quick as He did to me.
So let me ask you this. Based on you've been through a lot of things. You've seen more than 2 or 3 things. I should say that's not an exaggeration. You probably seen more than 2 or 3 things over the course of your life. What is the benefit of disciplining early in childhood as opposed to trying to wait until they're like teenagers?
Probably the most important thing, the devil's been after the family when I was a new Christian 40-some years ago. I heard he was after the family. Soon into my Christian walk, I knew he was divide and conquer. That was his job. Roe versus Wade. I mean, all these things and separating the family. With you look at women. I'm just going to say that some of the women have taken positions now in government in different places. Maybe, and there's a lot of reasons for it sometimes, maybe because the men haven't stood up. They've kind of lost their, as we, on Monday night, they don't know what a man is, and they don't know how to get it back. They don't know how to get their manhood back. and the woman has to stand up and raise the kids. The man could be in the house, and the woman's raising the children and trying to raise a third child in him. And I think that's it. The child always looks for the father for the discipline, and then the love. When my son Joey was in trouble, he was locked up. They put him away someplace. We went to visit him for a weekend or a day visit, and so he said, "Dad, my counselor wants to see you." So we're in the visiting room. So he called me, and I went over by where the counselor was sitting down, and I sat down with him. And the counselor said, "Mr. McGrogan," he says, "Joey, tell your dad what you told me." He said, "Well," I told him that that if my dad didn't discipline me and spank me, and then hug me and pray with me, I'd been dead by today. I've never been sitting here having this conversation. So my dad did the right thing, even though I made choices to do the wrong thing, and that was at an early age. I mean, there was times when I disciplined my children, especially Joey, spanking him. Oh God, am I doing the right? You just don't know when you discipline. But I certainly see in actually the 3 out of the 4, and even Joey today. Joey, unfortunately, he's had probably a couple of nervous breakdowns. He's been in prisons and stuff. Now he's living on the streets. He's 52 years old, and he's living in the streets still. And but he always calls us up on our birthday, and he calls us up when he's supposed to get his money, his SSI money. So but he always tells us he loves us, and he says, "I still love Jesus." He says, "Thank you." He always says, "Thank you." And I always do that thing on the phone, dilly dilly. It's kind of a thing. He knows what I'm talking about. I know it's a beer commercial, but he funny. Identifies with that stuff. It's kind of funny, and he goes, "Yeah, dilly dilly, Dad." Yeah. And he's my son. And Mike, my oldest, he's into the world. He doesn't know Jesus either, but I think that we instilled some things in him when he was younger that has carried him to not be a man of God, but he's got a great girlfriend. His marriage didn't work, and I think that hurt him greatly. He tried to make it work, but if you don't discipline early, they really go awry. And I, unfortunately, in the prison and working narcotics, seen a lot of that. And if the enemy is just out to destroy a family any way he can with this. The girls and boys today don't know who they are, and the teachers tell them this cross-gender stuff is just sickening. And I just think God looks down at it, and he's really, really, really not very happy. I think of the Indian on the hill, looking down at all the garbage that we strewed all over, and a tear coming down. Yeah. Tear coming down. I see God. That's God looking at his creation, going, "Look what they've done."
You just hit on something that I want to come back to real quick. You mentioned that kids look to the father for discipline and love. And it's definitely something I wanted to highlight in this particular episode, because we often confuse discipline with something other than love. Yeah. But discipline is love. And children do require, whether parents realize this or not, but children look for parental guidance. Now, we live in a culture right now that says children are supposed to find their own way. They're supposed to figure it out for themselves. You just take your hands off and let them figure it out for themselves, which is antithesis to actually being a parent. Because if children were born knowing exactly what to do, they don't need you. You are now. What is your role in their life if they have everything figured out, or if they can figure everything out? We have adults that can't figure stuff out.
Right. Amen.
And if you as an adult can't figure it out, it's generally because you had parents that didn't help you figure things out. Other thing too is that you just alluded to with your son, and it's this, and people look for perfection. There's no such thing, and you can do everything right, or even 99.9% things right with your children. That doesn't mean they're not going to choose their own way later in life. The only thing it means is you taught what they needed to learn, and they made a choice. And all human beings have that choice. We all have free will. And just because you have a child that chose to go a different way, I have this conversation with my daughter, and I say, I pray for you daily, that you make the right decisions, that you take everything that you've learned to this point not only seriously, but knowing that out of love, I've given you the direction you need to have in order to make the right decisions. I say, now, if you go out tomorrow and you rob a bank, that's on you. I said, I still love you, and I'm gonna come visit you.
You know, my a thing I told my two oldest boys, just to get on that, is that I don't know how old they were, but they were together. You know, they were older, and I looked at the two of them and I said, one day you're gonna have to forgive me. I tried to do the best I could as a dad and raise the both of you as the best I could, but the four of you, I said I did the best I could. There were some hiccups, yeah, I might have done the wrong thing or the right thing, I even know. But you might not like this, but you will have to forgive me. When you do that, there's going to be freedom in your life. They didn't quite understand it back then, but I think they understand it now. And that unforgiveness is a thing, you look at it, the Bible is one of the things that just holds people in check, and it just takes the life out of them.
Yes, absolutely. No, so we do the best we can with what we have.
Yeah.
And but part of the point of this particular broadcast is sometimes, you know, parents find themselves in a situation for whatever reason. Maybe they, you know, you can't know what you don't know. And so part of this particular endeavor is to just give some tools.
Yep.
Let's, you know, discuss some actual practical things that you can do that's going to help set your children up later in life, especially when they get into those preteen, teenage years.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Listen, I think because human beings have this innate desire to be independent, I'm going to always test boundaries, especially in children. And the older they get, and especially as they approach preteen and then into the teenage years, they got to push that envelope to see exactly what they can get away with and what they can and can't do. And that's when you have to remain diligent as a parent. But parenting anymore now it's fun time parenting. It's, you know, just let me be friends with my kids. They'll figure out the rest of life as they go along. I actually had a conversation over social media with a lady out of New York, and she was telling me that she didn't need a man to teach her boy how to be a man. He was 17 and he knew to open doors for ladies, and he know how he wants his mother to be treated and how his sister to be treated. So he's, you know, that makes him a man. And I said, no, ma'am, I'm sorry to tell you, because I grew up the exact same way. I knew to open the door for the ladies. I knew to say yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. I knew not to disrespect the young ladies that I was with. But that does not make you a man. Yeah. So you did not teach him what you thought you were teaching him. Right. It takes a man to teach a man, teach a boy how to be a man. And her reply to that was, well, he'll figure that out in adulthood. And I said, well, you just doomed some poor woman or some poor girls. Yeah. You just doomed them to pain and misery until he figures it out. And I say he will, you know, through prayer and supplication, he just might figure it out. Right. He might. It's not guaranteed, but he might figure it out. But the intervening time when he could have saved himself and other folks a lot of pain and anguish by having that training. As a young kid, moving into his teenage years, moving into a young adult, he's 17 now, according to her. She's 17. Well, he's a young adult. He's about to be out of the house. He's about to be responsible for his own actions. And I say, hey, well, I lift the young man up in prayer. And I was actually a little bit surprised and thankful, because her last message to me on the subject was, perhaps you're right, and maybe I've gone about this the wrong way. And I was like, well, there's hope for us yet. Yeah. There's hope for us yet.
Just this morning, one last note maybe, my daughter and my son-in-law and good friends of theirs went on a vacation to Greece. Really, my son's got a good job, God's blessed him. But so the 5 grandchildren are with grandma, his mom. She's watching them, Obi, and she called this morning and was telling us what Ian, the 16-year-old, has been not doing. And on speakerphone, I had to go in the other room. I just went in the other room. My wife talked. So she got back. How come you didn't want to hear it? I said, I'm picking him up for work tonight. She said, you going to talk to him? I said, oh yeah. And she was telling Camille that we have a good relationship. Him and I have a good relationship. Not that the parents don't, but the parents are away and the mice will play.
Right. Okay.
And he's gotten this. I mean, I heard a couple of things that he's better than that. And I will address it this afternoon with that. And that's a thing that we used to have years ago. If somebody was babysitting you or your grandparents were sitting, mom and dad, they took the parents' place. You don't have that anymore.
No.
You have parents today because they don't do the right thing. They just give their kids to anybody. And here's the thing. When you have two men that are supposedly married or two women that are married and they're raising a boy or a girl and they're walking them and teaching them, what in heaven's name are they teaching them how to be a man, how to be a woman, when there's two men or two women raising?
Yeah, something's lost.
It's not, and this is almost becoming, and it's really not a great percentage. It's just that the media has proposed this up in front of our faces to say, do you see how bad things are getting? They're really not getting, they're getting bad. But if guys like you and me don't stand our ground at a time like this and stand up for values and morals and the things that do work through the Word of God, then what else are we going to do?
So we're needing to discipline these children. So I'm out in, I won't name it establishment, but it's one that most people go to. A lot of people go to, and it's great for people watching because you see how the kids interact with the parents that are supposed to be adults. And I actually saw this, Dennis. I saw a 3-year-old snatch. And when I say snatch, I mean it in its truest sense of the word. Not take away, in a way that was diligent. I mean snatch with great force. A tablet from the mom. The mom had took it from her because I don't know what the reason was, but she took it from her. 3-year-old walks up and snatches it out of the mom's hand. Mom says, "You don't do that. That's not nice. You don't do that. Give it back. Give it back." And the girl's going, "No, no, no." And Dennis, do you know that little girl was able to keep that tablet? And I'm thinking to myself,
do you think it's the first time she did that?
Absolutely not.
Ooh.
It's not the first time. Because she was the dexterity in this little 3-year-old. She snatched it and walked off with it and was tapping away on the screen and was going to sit down and telling mom no at the same time. Like, well, this little girl, she's 3, she's multitasking and being rude and disrespectful.
That's kind of a problem to me. I know I'm older, but multitasking and doing all that at 3 years old, I think there's something a little wrong with that. Too much information at such a young age.
Absolutely.
And most of it's the wrong information.
Oh, yeah. So she's to me, she's and I know what the end result was, because after she sat down and the mom gave up trying to get the tablet back from this 3-year-old, because apparently she has no power or authority over this 3-year-old. She's watching a video. She pulled up her own video and she's watching it. She's completely enthralled. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, that couldn't be me. And so I was out with some folks, and the question was like, well, what would you do if that was your 3-year-old? I said, well, first of all, there's no child is snatching anything out of my hand. The retribution would be swift and decisive. I said, because what a child does to their parent, they will go out and do to anybody else. And so, and that's something that a lot of people just don't understand, that this is how a lot of these kids get in trouble. You're talking about getting bullied a lot, but no one talks about the child as bullying, because that's nobody's fault. We never talk about where do these children come from. This little girl, I say, she will be the 12 and 13-year-old bully. Because if she can do that to her mother, your child doesn't stand a chance against her. And so I was like, okay, what what do we do? So I actually put this out there to a couple of folks. I'm like, well, for one thing, that little girl would have lost any access to that tablet right there, right then and right there. But the next logical thing came out was, well, she's going to have a meltdown right in the middle of that. And I said, okay, this is why you take care of things at home, because there shouldn't be a meltdown in public if there are no meltdowns at home. You handle the meltdowns at home.
That won't happen.
That won't happen in public. And so it's like, okay, so here, let's get practical. The meltdowns. I had a niece, have a niece. She's much older now, but at the time she was about 3. And she had this, what I consider a terrible habit. When she didn't get her way, she cried. And she didn't just cry. Yeah. She would fall out. And she would kick and she would, pound the ground. Yeah. And she should be mortified if she saw this, because I think right now she's 16 or 17. But she would remember this vividly, probably. And she wasn't my child. She's my niece, not my child. So I wouldn't spank her. I wouldn't. But she was left in my care. And I said, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. I pick her up off the ground. I put her in the chair. And she just cried. Didn't bother me. Wouldn't let it bother me, because what she wanted to know was her crying was bothering. And she knows once she annoyed an adult enough, she's going to get what she wanted. Yep. Well, that lasted for about an hour. And I just was way more patient than her. And then she would quit, and then I'd wait a few minutes and I'd go over and talk to her. I said, do you know why I left you in this chair? And so I would say, hey, look, this is what we're not going to do. We're not going to cry because we're not getting our way. If you're hungry, if you're injured, I got you. If you're crying because you're not getting your way, you're going to sit in this chair. That's just the way it's going to be. Okay? Okay, get down, go play. Not 5 minutes later, I hear the crying because she's not getting her way. Some adult took something from her that she wasn't supposed to have. Yeah. Go get in the chair. She climbs up in the chair. She's sitting there crying. Instead of an hour, it was 10 minutes. The next day, same thing. She starts crying. Go get in the chair. Instead of 10 minutes, it was 3. And so she was beginning to understand, well, I may not be getting my way, but sitting here sucks. And so, so fast forward to the conversation I was having with some folks that saw this girl with the tablet. She snatches the tablet, this and the other, and mom doesn't take the tablet, presumably because it would create a situation where this little girl melts down in the middle of the store. I said, well, here's how you prevent the meltdown. Now, that particular niece would never melt down in the store. Now, she may start because kids are kids.
Sure.
But I named it the crying chair. And the beauty of it was a crying chair could be any chair. You didn't have to have that particular chair. Right. Just needed somewhere to sit. And so when we would go out and I would point at a chair at random. I said, that's your crying chair. And she would look back at me, and she knew exactly what that meant. And then we'd have no meltdowns. And I could take anything I wanted from her, whether it be a pair of scissors or a knife or any other thing you don't want a 3-year-old running around with.
Yeah.
Or even if we're a tablet. If your time is up, your time is up. And now it's give me the tablet, your time is up. There's no crying. There's no melting down. Right. Well, folks, that's a very practical example. I call it a crying chair. It's very simple. It's cost effective because it doesn't cost you anything except a little bit of patience, more patience than the child. Yeah. And you start at 2-3 years old. And in fact, I would start earlier than that. As soon as you know your child knows the difference between yes and no, that's when it starts. Yeah. Because those and I have pictures of kids crying, no tears. I said, they're not hurt. They're just not getting their way. And sometimes it's appropriate, because especially when you have kids around other kids and things happen, you have to investigate and see why they're crying. And there may not be any tears, but what was rightfully theirs was taken by another child, and it was not a good situation, you have to step in and take care of that. You have to, but that's part of being parenting. I mean, my goodness, you can't be lazy about it. But once you understand that they're crying simply because they're not getting their way, then you got to handle that. Then that takes care of the meltdowns. Well, what ends up happening when they're, and you do this consistently, and when this is happening when they're 12, and of course it's not crying anymore, it's now words. It's the words now. It's the eye rolling. It's the bad body language. It's the bad words. It's the door slamming. It's this, that, and the other. Now, when you come in and discipline, they understand that, okay, I'm not going to get out from under this until the behavior changes.
Yeah.
But if you don't, it's too late. I get parents and they'll say, hey, what would you do for a 12-year-old that does this, this, and this? I said, what did you do when they were 2? Oh, they was, we went through our terrible 2s, but you know how kids are, so we just kind of let them do that. I said, well, when you didn't address things when they were 2, what do you want to do when they're 12? What are you going to do? So now you're a hostage in your own house.
You got that right.
You're a hostage in your own house.
Yeah.
And you're embarrassed by your own kids. And you hear some of the most horrible things. I've heard 14 and 15-year-olds tell their mom, oh, I hate you, you're a B. And I'm, at that point, I'm, they're like, oh, what if your daughter? I said, well, when she wakes up, I'll explain to her what happened to her, why it happened, and that I love her, and don't ever say that ever again, because your friends can't take care of you. You don't want a friend in me. You want a parent. I take care of you. House, clothes, food, and all your extracurricular activities. All praises be to God. But you would not disrespect me in such a way. But that goes back to, like I said, when my daughter was 12 and she was slightly losing her mind in middle school, she knew I meant business when she was on punishment. And she knew that the only way to get out from under her sentence, if you will, was to modify her behavior to what was conducive for good society.
Sure.
So that's just one of the things. I don't know if you have any insights on the crying chair or any other toddler activities that you can.
Just with our kids, we my wife's help, we just took things away that was important to them, and wouldn't punish them for a week or two. I don't believe that kind of stuff doesn't work. But the effect needs to be done. It has to be done right away. You can't wait on it.
Oh yeah.
And I think explaining it, if you don't explain it, then they don't understand it, and it doesn't do any good. Like we were talking earlier, and they kids are not stupid.
No.
They will try and try and try. I think maybe society today, I think a lot of the parents, maybe because some of the pressure they've been under with what's going on in the world and different things, the evil in the world, is wanting people to give up. And I think as Christians, we continue to read the Word and do the Word. What does the Word say about raising children, treating women with respect?
Right.
And when we continue to do that, once you get saved, you got to continue to work on it. You got to keep getting tools and making yourself better, bigger, stronger, and more effective, not just for your family, but for people in the world. But it all starts at home. I had an incident on my bus, and you know about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that kid didn't need me coming back, and I kind of guerrillaed the situation. My wife finally made me see the light. I didn't say anything bad to him, but I guerrillaed the situation. He gets that at home. He gets that in school. He got that in the prison. He just did a skid bid. He did 6 months, and he came back and he's in school, and it's a special school for kids that have problems. He didn't need this old bus driver that used to work in a prison treating him like an inmate that when I didn't know Jesus. He doesn't need to be guerrillaed. He needs to be loved. Now, I'm not saying, oh, give me a hug. I'm not talking about that.
Right.
Let all the kids, like I shared earlier, get off the bus and say, hey, Jimmy, dude, what's going on? And I've done that, I don't know how many times. I usually always do it. Some of the people that heard my story said, D, you're better than that. What happened? Till today, I just know what God was in it. I'm out of it. I'm actually looking at something else, which is good. But I should have put my arms around him, not literally, but love that child.
Right.
He's hurting for certain.
Right.
And we don't take enough time to do that. Okay, they've been banged up. They didn't get it when they were younger. But again, like we talked earlier, it's never too late.
Right.
It's never too late. And it starts with us. They're looking to us for help. They're looking for the older people, the generation, to come alongside them and say, hey,
Absolutely.
you're going to be okay.
It's
going to be okay.
It's time up for the return of the elders in its true sense. We have a lot of elderly. We don't have a lot of elders.
No.
And I want to circle back to something you mentioned from a biblical perspective, especially when it comes to parenting. From a young age, year 1s and 2s, right on through high school, and into post high school, whatever that be, them going into the workforce or collegiately. From a biblical perspective, and it's, you find in the Bible, spare the rod, spoil it, well, that's not in the Bible. That's a saying, spare the rod, spoil a child. But that concept of the rod comes from, Psalms, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. A lot of people take that thoroughly out of context when you speak of the rod, and it becomes this, you're supposed to beat your children. But shepherds use a rod to redirect their sheep, not necessarily to beat them with the rod, but the rod just symbolizes discipline. You're going the wrong way. Let me use my rod to redirect you. You mentioned the kid on the bus, and you don't have to put your arms around them and say, "Oh, poo, poor you," this, that, and the other. It's another way of wrapping your arms is the rod. Another way of wrapping your arms is saying, "Hey, this behavior is not appropriate, but if there's something going on that I can help you with, hey, come talk to me." That's redirection. That's at least an attempt at redirection. So a lot of folks, and I don't want people to get confused. I don't want people to be like, "Oh, you're just talking about beating kids." No, that's not what this is about. This is the world has convinced itself that redirecting children is wrong, and I'm here to proclaim it is not. In fact, you want better outcomes for your children, whether it be in life in general or mental health issues, especially when you get into these preteen and teenage years. These kids need to know that you care. These kids that act out the most know they have parents that would not checking up on them, not going to even attempt to redirect them. So they go out and do what they want to do, and they're looking for validation in other places. And people will completely dismiss what I'm saying, and I'm all for the negative comments that'll come flying in when I say, spare the rod, spoil the child. I'm just waiting for everybody to take that out of context, and that's fine. I'd be willing to entertain and engage in that discussion, and some people will receive it, and this is for the people who will receive it, because there are children out there right now hurting. There are 8 and 9-year-olds looking for direction from their parents, looking for that example. And kids cannot articulate this. No. They know what they feel, but they can't put that into words. That's why all this new age, let kids find their way, let them decide for themselves, let them pick their gender. And I mean, come on. If your job as a parent is to not guide, then you have been misled. And I'm just not going to mince words. You have been misled. And so there's another aspect. I had one more thing, and I saw this commercial yesterday. Then I've seen it 2 or 3 times in the past couple days, and which is phenomenal because I don't watch that much television. There's just nothing on. If it's not sports, I'm not watching it. But I've seen this commercial several times, and it dawned on me because I knew I was going to be doing this, and I see a kid in a high chair, and her face is just covered with look like spaghetti sauce, the dad says, let me get you cleaned up before your mom gets home, which I kind of had heartburn with that because I'm like, why don't you just clean the kid? Because kids need to be clean, not because mom's on the way. If mom wasn't on the way, you're going to let the child just be dirty? That makes no sense. But then he leaves and comes back, and I guess the dog had licked the child's face. Clean. Like, oh, that works. Actually, no, it doesn't. That's kind of disgusting. But, okay, here's the thing. I was looking at the child, and I was like, I don't recall ever letting my child get that disgusting.
In the first place.
In the first place. I mean, you get food around the mouth, but how'd it get on the forehead and the cheeks? Oh, you let kids play in the food and this, that, and the other. And I'm like, I didn't. That was that. And that was me. So, but here's my point. A lot of people don't take this into consideration, but table manners begin in the high chair.
Yep. Exactly.
Table manners begin in the high chair. Now, was there a time where I put a piece of cake in front of my daughter and just let her have at it?
Oh, yeah.
Because it was fun. It's fun to get those pictures. Fine. But this was not a daily occurrence. And so if you don't, and my point is this, if you don't take the time when they're small,
right,
forget about it later in life. So, I call them high chair protocols. There's feeding and there's that interaction. And all of that is, there's nothing that demonstrates to a child more, that you love them more, than when you sit with them and pay attention to what they're doing and how they're doing it.
Amen.
Children love it. And there'll be a lot of kids who will pretend, or they'll make you seem, because they're not getting their way right in that moment, they'll make it try to seem like, it's the worst thing ever. But you got to get past that. I mean, when did adults stop being adults? When did, as an adult, your feelings as a child, when I'm teaching you, take a back seat to the teaching. I'm teaching for a reason.
Yep.
I'm teaching to help you be the best you can be in life. Now, you might not want to hear what I have to say. And oftentimes, kids don't, especially when you get into the teenage years. Oh, Dad, this again. Oh, hold on. No, we're not gonna be disrespectful, because there's a reason, and you will learn soon enough.
Yeah.
And there's nothing more gratifying than to have an 18-year-old call you up and say, Dad, I'm glad you did it this way. I'm glad you made me do my homework when I didn't feel like doing my homework.
Like this,
I'm glad I had a curfew. My daughter she's 18 now. She didn't get social media until she was 17. And even then I have full access to it. And I have people comment, how were you able to do that? How was I able? How are you not able? That would be the better question. Well, I'm able to do it because I started when she was 2. Actually, when she was 1.
Yep.
I started when she was 1. And so when she came to me about social media when she was 14, 15 years old, the answer was no.
It's a dirty word called discipline. I think you see these people that work their whole lives, and some of them are just terrible with money. They just money burns a hole in their pocket. They spend it on stuff they shouldn't. No discipline at all. Yet there's others. The husband and wife say, "Look, let's take this amount and put it away.
Yeah,
like save it for a rainy day."
Mm-hmm.
So then when they get down the line, the right thing is done. It's just the kids watch. My daughter and my son-in-law, they give the kids allowances, but they have things that they do. There's a checklist. There's a whole checklist, and if they don't do what they're supposed to do, oh no, you're supposed to get $5. No, it's $4.50. That's $3.50. But you didn't put. Yeah, but no.
Dennis, that is just horrible parenting. They're so mean to those kids. That's what the worldly reaction is. But that is holding a child accountable for what they do or don't do.
What about the last place baseball team getting trophies?
No.
I had a hard time saying that right now.
No participation.
I showed up. That's so wrong.
Yeah.
I showed up.
No, well, because the only thing, you have to breed mediocrity in order to exert control.
Yep.
Because mediocre people are easily controlled.
Yep.
Easily controlled, easily manipulated, They fail to think because no one ever and when I say no one, I mean parents have entered into a contract with the rest of the world to say, you know what, world, you teach my child. And I refuse to, because the hardest lessons to learn, and I've been down the road, and we won't go there on this episode, but I've been down the road where the world taught me what I should have learned when I was younger, didn't get it, got it now, but man, it's expensive and it's painful, emotionally and physically.
Oh, sure. Well, and too, Daryl, what's wrong with parents when they all of a sudden they didn't discipline their child when they were 3-4 years old, and all of a sudden they're 13 or 14 and now they got a problem? What's wrong with them realizing it, whoops, and getting help, reaching out for some, like, who do they associate? Show me my dad used to say, show me your company and I'll tell you who you are. I couldn't have figured that out for years. Show me who you're running with.
Absolutely. You
got mentors, you got people in church, on your job, someone you look up to. Go, hey, you got to humble yourself and say, I got a problem with my 13-year-old. Oh, I don't know anybody, but I got Dennis and Daryl. They can help. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I had a problem when I was getting sober. I had a problem in this area. I went to my sponsor and he goes, I haven't got a problem, but Jimmy, called Jimmy over. Me and Jimmy went and had a cup of coffee. Didn't cure me, but now I understand. Right. I had someone to share that it's not the end of the world. You're going to go through it. You'll not die. You won't die. Discipline will not. Discipline raises a child up. It doesn't put them down.
Absolutely.
It raises them up to an area they'll never be able to go to in their whole life.
Not only will they not die, they'll have a better life.
Oh, much better.
And so we're going to take a moment, right, real quick, and we're going to move into kids that are acting grown. So guys, watch this real quick. Just a few clips, and we'll be right back.
Mom,
what?
put him down and away.
I see some marker on my wall. Who did it?
The mystery bandage.
Who?
The mystery bandage.
The mystery bandit?
Yeah.
Look at me.
The mystery bandage.
So that's who did it, not you?
No.
Are we certain?
No.
Should I check the videotape?
No.
Why not?
Because I love you. Well, one night, y'all took the cover off of me a little bit. Then I put it back. Then I took it off of y'all. Because you took it off of me. Then I took it back off of y'all.
That's not too nice.
Well, sometimes kids have to do what kids have to do. That's all.
But I have to yell at you guys.
Okay, Linda, listen. Listen, Linda. Listen.
Okay, what?
Like everything they do at this house, you can't trust everything at Grandma's house.
Okay.
Okay, then what?
Then you're not listening to me.
Then you're not listening to me.
So, I see these, and I want to throw a few videos up just so people can know that I am not just making this stuff up. It's all over social media.
Yeah.
Pick a format: YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. It's whatever.
That
you
TikTok is not good.
You have these 2-year-olds, and they're and I guess these parents think it's like so cute. It's so great to have these little kids prancing around, trying to sound like adults with no adult understanding because they don't have any life experience. So there's no way on earth they're speaking from experience. They're only speaking from what they've seen, and they're regurgitating what they've seen, and that is not a substitute for experience. Well, unfortunately, these same kids grow up thinking, well, I'm on equal footing with all of that, not only with my parents, but any adult that I run into.
Sure.
And then here comes the disrespect, but they lend themselves to being preyed upon by manipulative people, adults, who, because they don't have the proper life experience, they can't tell the sheep from the wolves.
No, they can't.
And so,
that's a good point.
So when you're 2, that looks cute. When you're 12 and you actually think you're an adult and you're not, you have set your child up in such a way where you end up you know, tossing and turning that night, or you go into the bedroom and they're not in there, and you don't know what to do, and you know, they're just out of control, and you know, back in the days when I was watching you know, like a Maury Povich or Ricky Lake or all those other insane you know, daytime shows where they bring these teens on and they were out of control, and oh, they were so precocious growing up, and they were all, you know, they were just so smart as a whip, and you would think they was like one of us, and you know, we treated, the recurring theme was they all got treated like miniature adults.
Same level. You can't.
You can't, and you can't do that. It's not same level because it's not same experience. And I consider myself a man. Dennis, I consider you a man, but I'm not so foolish. I am not so foolish as to think that you and I have the same experience. It's not going to be the same. It's not supposed to be the same. And so I'm not going to, you know, just ride. I can ride with you with my experience and not try to circumvent or overtake what you have been through, because you've been down the road. You're a little further down the road than I am. So there's got to be a level of respect.
Yeah.
For
there's that word again. Even as we gotten older, here we are talking, and a younger man talking to a little older man, going, "I respect you."
Right.
Oh my God.
Right. But you.
Jeez.
But you pick that up in childhood.
Yes, you do.
That's
where it starts.
Yeah, you pick that up in childhood, and when you spare the rod, when you don't redirect, when you treat children like they're little adults, then what you end up with are 20-somethings and 30-somethings today, maybe a few 40-somethings.
Trying to run the country?
Or trying to run everybody, but they can't run themselves. And again, it goes back to I'm
sorry. It's funny you say that about no discipline as a child. These same people, years later, are in positions in our country, and they have no discipline, no direction, no purpose in their lives, and they're trying to lead a state or a county or a nation. And we're looking at the no discipline, and people go, "Oh no, you can't discipline." This is the main problem today. That's right up front. I just got that.
Absolutely,
that's why.
No, and the only thing that you can do when you grow up with in a household with no discipline is because as a child you ran the house. You couldn't run yourself, but you ran the house. So you become that adult that can't run themselves. Yeah. But they're attempting to run the house, and then we not me and you, Dennis, but the rest of society, you know, sit back and go, "Oh, well, they're doing the best they can, or they're only human." And you know what? Perfection was never the standard. Perfection is never the standard.
No.
And I know I'm not perfect. However, there's what was it? Is Doc Holliday in Tombstone, and he says, you know, one of the best lines is, you know, "It seems my hypocrisy knows no bounds." But I have bounds. My hypocrisy has bounds. I know I have my own imperfections. Yeah. So but I recognize that, and I will not step outside of that. So my hypocrisy.
Well, it doesn't work. We've learned from experience. We step out there, it doesn't work.
Right. No, you get run over. And you work on things, but there's when a child is growing up, and like I said, it goes back to 1, 2, 3 years old. If you're not taking care of things at that age, good luck when they hit teenage years. So ladies and gentlemen, if you have 1, 2, 3-year-old, 4 or 5-year-olds now, discipline now, because it becomes a nightmare or almost impossible once they hit the teenage years.
Along with that, though, Daryl, is when we do discipline, you're not going to die, and it's okay. And you're listening to two guys that have experience, and I trust God and the Bible. It's the right thing to do. It's not the wrong thing to do, but you also must hug them. You need to hug them, even if they don't want to take a hug from you, even if they, screaming and everything, "You don't love me." They'll never forget you disciplined, and they cried. They didn't like it. Maybe it hurt a little bit, but from doing wrong. But the hug will bring it all together.
You know what, Dennis, and now that you bring that up, and what I see a lot is parents do a lot of talking. They don't do a lot of doing. They do a lot of talking. So take that talk and combine it with action of discipline, and you got the whole base covered. Because it's not discipline if you're just doing things and you don't explain what's happening. That's just abuse. That's another element of discipline. You're not correcting anything if that child doesn't know you're going to be there for them. You're not. You just not. But that's the other side of the pendulum. We talked about being too far left and too far right. You got to be down. You got to be the center of the road. So it's for my daughter, for example. And as much as I had to discipline her from time to time, I showed up to her recitals. You know, I would pop up for one of the. She mentioned this the other day. She loved it when I popped up out of the blue.
Yeah, she didn't maybe expect you to be there.
Yeah, you know,
didn't know you were going to make it. Yeah,
lunchtime at her elementary school.
That's
And she come bebopping into the cafeteria, and she be, Dad, you know, that's the greatest. That's the greatest. You can't beat that feeling. But she also knows that that's Dad. That's Dad, and when she's in trouble, that's Dad. And
it might be a sacrifice too for us. Are you willing to sacrifice for the life of your child? And that could lead to that.
I'm
showing up in the middle of the day. I should be working. I should be doing.
Yeah.
Sacrifice.
Yeah.
They don't know the word.
Didn't stress me. I didn't want to eat cafeteria food out of elementary school. I did not.
Sitting in a little chair.
Oh yeah. Chair can.
You're a big dude, man.
Can barely support me. But I was there, and you know who else got a kick out of that? Her friends.
Oh, yeah.
Her friends got it.
Wish my dad would have done that.
And you don't know how many times I've heard that.
Sure.
And I would have to kind of bat a tear away.
Yep.
And I'm like, you know, and maybe there are people who can't, you know, show up like that, and that's fine, because you know I have the ability to swing by and do that from time to time. But there are other ways. There are so many other ways. So yeah, don't take this conversation out of context, ladies and gentlemen. If you know, there's multiple aspects to parenting. Discipline is just one of those things. Without it, it's difficult to be a good parent. And too much of it without explanation is just abuse, and then that's just horrible parenting. I don't even call that parenting. That's not even being a parent. But we have to get back to the middle of the road. We have to get back to setting an example for our children, demonstrating love, and demonstrating the fact that you cannot just do what you want to do, because a lot of the things kids want to do are very detrimental to their health. I mean, you know, what would you do, Dennis, if you saw your son running around with a screwdriver getting ready to stick it into a socket? Oh, quite naturally, you want to redirect him. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's expected.
Here's the thing to the parents that made a mistake when they were younger and didn't do it, that God is a God of second chances. And if you really believe that, He will give you an opportunity in your life somewhere along the line to not make up for it, but get a chance as a do-over. Maybe with someone else's. If you're open to that instead of condemning yourself, it just helps to be more open to God showing up and doing things that you never thought possible before.
Family on Trial is your source for insights and information that's going to protect you and your family. So do us a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe, and share, and join us over at familyontrial.org where the conversation continues. You guys are awesome.